What's up, you guys? Welcome to Coffee Code Repeat. My name is Chase, and today we're going to be going over what you need to get started programming. This includes what type of computer you'll need and how powerful it should be, what type of languages you might want to learn, and also what software you need to actually start writing your code. So first, I'm going to grab some coffee, and then we're going to go ahead and get into this. So whether you work in the tech industry or you're just thinking about getting your first computer, getting started in programming can seem intimidating at best and impossible at worst. You might think that you can't start programming without a degree, or you have to be messing around with computers your whole life, and I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. It doesn't matter if you have zero experience, it doesn't matter how old you are, you're not too young and you're not too old to get started. You may want to make your own video games or start building robots, or maybe you want to make a career change into software engineering, IT, hacking, cybersecurity, or maybe you think it would be just fun to do as a hobby. Whatever your reason, learning how to code can make you more successful in many situations, and in reality, it's not as complicated as it seems. That's part of what I want to do with this channel. I want to share what I know to help build a community of learners and makers and hopefully help you accomplish your goals. I'll be making tutorials on programming basics, including more in-depth tutorials about what we cover today. I want to build cool stuff and share what I learn along the way. I want to share my process of learning more about all the areas of tech that catch my eye. And I tend to have a lot of interest areas, so it could be pretty broad. If you like what I'm doing and you want to see more, please subscribe for future content, and it would really mean a lot. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into this stuff. So what do you actually need? First thing first is a computer. And a little disclaimer here, I work for Microsoft, and some of the things I cover in my videos are products of Microsoft. All my views and opinions here are not associated with them at all. I'm doing this in my off time, and I do it just because I want to help people try and get into programming. I come from a space where I didn't actually grow up around computers and programming, and I don't go to college, I don't have a degree. And so I know how sometimes it can be difficult, and I want to help people get through that. So when I say computers, I don't necessarily mean the actual hardware like a Dell or HP. I'm really talking about the operating system. If you don't know what an operating system is, it's totally fine. If you've used a computer before or a smartphone, then you've worked with an operating system. It's just the software that acts as an interface between you and your computer or smartphone. Windows, iOS, macOS are all operating systems, and they just define how you interact with apps, web browsers, files, and a lot more. But for now, we're going to take a quick look at 3 operating systems really briefly. As I started making this section, it kind of took on a life of its own, so I'm going to do an in-depth video to talk more about considerations when choosing your computer. But for now, I'm going to do my best to give you what I feel are some of the biggest things to keep in mind. So there are 2 main operating systems and then Linux that most people will be using. And I put Linux into its own category because technically there are a bunch of different versions of Linux that all have their pros and cons, and I definitely don't have time for all of those in this video. So here are the biggest things you might want to keep in mind. One is price. You can get a wide range of Windows machines for just about any budget. Some will be better or worse, but you'll be able to find something usable out there. Apple's products, on the other hand, are a bit on the higher end of things. The cheapest laptop you can still get is $1,000, and they only go up from there. Linux machines are in the same price range as Windows, and since Linux is a much lighter operating system, it might even run better than Windows on the same hardware. So budget does matter here, but if you have some flexibility, then it's more about your preference, what you like in an operating system. That brings us to number 2, and that's preference. If you're already familiar with an operating system and you like it, it might be beneficial to stick with that one instead of having to learn an entirely new system on top of whatever else you're trying to learn. The last point that I have for this video is complexity. Both Windows and Mac are pretty widely used and known in the consumer space. Most likely, you'll be able to get up and running with either of them pretty quickly. Linux is a different story. Most manufacturers don't have Linux preloaded on their machines, so you'll have to load it on yourself, and while there are Linux versions focused on ease of use, they still might require a bit of work to understand and use correctly. Now, in defense of Linux, it's a must-have skill in the tech industry. It's super powerful, secure, and fast. It's a massively important operating system and is worth learning if you have the patience and determination to get your head around it. All right, so let's move on to the specs. Now, you can deep dive into this, but I'm here to kind of sum it up and give you the minimum specs that you'll want, and you can go up from there if your wallet is feeling generous. But this is the minimum requirement. So first, for CPU, you'll want at least an Intel i5. Again, you can get better ones and they will make a difference, but an i5 will work when you're starting out in programming. And if you're set on Apple, any of their new M series chips will work for your need. At the time of making this video, only the M1 chip is out, but I figured I'd clarify and future-proof myself. Next is RAM. RAM stands for Random Access Memory, and it's really important to keep in mind when choosing your computer. It's basically a fast, short-term hard drive. It lets your computer keep working on things without having to get it from long-term storage like your actual hard drive. Kind of like keeping your materials on the table next to you rather than going out to the closet every time you need to get something or put something away. And this is really oversimplified, but for now, just know you need at least 8 gigabytes of RAM for your machine. In Apple's latest machine, you can look for unified memory. That's the same number to look for. So lastly is storage. How big of a hard drive do you actually need? In my opinion, you'll want at least 256 gigabytes. One of the great things about storage is that you can buy external storage like a thumb drive or an external SSD. They work great and can help keep your costs down in your initial computer purchase. If you have a little bit more room in your budget, then I would put it towards RAM first, CPU second, and then storage if you've maxed out the other two. All right, on to the stuff you've been waiting for. Now, if you've been wanting to get into programming for a while, you might already know that there are a bunch of different programming languages and they all have their own strengths and purposes. If you're watching this because you're just starting to look into it, well, now you know. There are a lot of programming languages used for different things, and they have different standards, different communities, and in a lot of ways, they shape you as a developer. If you have a specific goal in mind for programming, there is probably a best language out there for that purpose. But one of the cool things about programming is that for the most part, there are some consistent core concepts that you'll learn as you move forward. Once you learn these core concepts and tools, it's much easier to learn another language. Since you already know the basics, then all you have to do is learn how that language speaks differently. It speaks differently. Like English and Spanish, for instance, they're words that mean the same thing, right? But you say them and use them differently. Programming languages work kind of in the same way. In my opinion, Python is probably the best language for beginners, and that's what I'm going to be working with in this channel. It's really great language, and I'm going to talk about all of the benefits of Python and do a walkthrough how to get started with it, including installation and writing your first program in my next video, so be sure to stick around for that. For now, I'm going to be short and sweet. Python is a readable language for beginners, and that's a huge help. Normally, sometimes in other languages, there's a lot of different symbols, and it might look like, another language. Python reads kind of like English. So the way that it's written and its style, it's made to be simple. It's in Python's ethos to be as simple as possible. And for a person like me, that's a great thing. But don't let that simplicity fool you. Python is extremely powerful and versatile. It doesn't matter what you want to get into, like web development, making video games, IT administration, data science, whatever. You can use Python to kickstart your journey, and it's going to be invaluable, whether as a hobby or as a career in technology. Lastly are the tools that you're going to use to write and manage your code. There are a lot of different tools out there that can help you as a programmer, but I'm only going to talk about 2 today. The first is an IDE, Integrated Development Environment. IDEs are programs that help you write and test your code. They have different features built in to help you write code in specific languages and help you prevent from making mistakes, or at least help you find them. So my suggestion for an IDE is Visual Studio Code. Now, VS Code is a Microsoft product that is completely free. It's lightweight, meaning it'll be able to run pretty easily on your computer of choice, and it has a ton of community work around it and cool features. I'll be leaving links to Python, Visual Studio Code, and the next tool I'm going to talk about in the description below. And I'll be making tutorials on how to set all of these up soon. Last but not least is GitHub. Now, some people might think that GitHub isn't something that you need to worry about as a beginner, but I respectfully disagree. GitHub is a way for you to store your code safely, work with others on projects, and be able to keep track of different versions of your code, or even be able to revert back to an older version if you find you made a big mistake in your code. Git and GitHub are a big area, and you don't need to know everything to use it effectively, even as a beginner. GitHub is free for personal use, and it's easy to get started with. VS Code also has some great built-in features to take away some of the complexity when working with GitHub. Keep an eye out for my next videos, because I'm going to have 3 videos to install and set up Python, GitHub, and Visual Studio Code for Python and GitHub. All right, so that's it for today's video, and we covered a lot. So here's a quick recap for what you need to get started. 1, you need a computer that fits your needs with at least an Intel i5, 8 gigs of RAM, and 256 gigs of storage. You need to choose what language you're going to learn. And I'm going to go with Python, and you need to install it on your computer. You'll need a couple of tools like an IDE, Visual Studio Code, and a place to keep your code safely like GitHub or GitLab. So thank you all so much for watching. If you did like the video and you want to see more, please consider subscribing. I want this to be a community, so if you have things you thought of that I missed or you have questions, comment down below and I'm going to be keeping an eye out for you. Thanks again. So until next time, coffee, code, repeat. I don't have a sign off thing yet, but we'll see. If you have an idea for that too, leave it down on the bottom. Alrighty, talk to you guys later.